God used Lee Brown to teach me to always welcome new friendships that come my way, because sometimes when you least expect it, God sends you a really awesome one like Lee Dog, who through his talents and his heart taught me and so many others about God's love.
Lee Brown taught me that every human being longs to love and to be loved, and that every human being has value. I really knew that in my head, but Lee made it real for me.
God used Lee Brown to teach me that everyone deserves to be looked in the eye, and that everyone deserves a human touch.
Mr. Lee taught me that there is so much power in vulnerability.
The thing that I learned out of the relationship with Lee was don't be too hasty to judge somebody. I think God put me in a place where, frankly, people who would be like Lee, who would look like Lee, who would act like Lee, were people I'd avoided my whole life. And then all of a sudden, I found myself defending Lee to friends of mine who were telling me, "Be careful! Don't get too close to this guy. He can hurt you." And I realized that Lee had taught me just not to worry about those external things. It just didn't matter anymore. And so once I got to know him, there was a puppy dog there. He was just a wonderful person.
Yes, Lee Brown was on and off the streets of Memphis for over 20 years. But for those of us who knew Lee, he was more than that homeless guy. He was our friend. My name is Kevin Rogers, and it's hard to define my relationship with Lee Dog. I was part counselor, part chauffeur, part sounding board, and part breakfast buddy. First time we hung out together outside of church was the first Saturday morning I went to get him for breakfast. He wanted to go to the Chick-fil-A on Union. Little did I know of his celebrity status there. Lee and I hardly talked at all because he spent most of our time introducing me to all his friends. For many of us, Lee was a test of our patience. I loved the man, but when he was in a mood, he could be one of the most negative people you have ever met in your life. When he was angry, he could direct it at everyone in his path. One thing we always agreed upon was that while I would listen to him, tell him his problems, I wouldn't let him wallow in them. When he would fall off the wagon and tell me about it, I would let him know that while I was disappointed, it wouldn't change how I felt about him, and we would move on and try to do better. Sometimes you just had to love where he was. It convicted me because God often does that for us. You never knew which Lee you were getting. You had to be ready when he got into the car. On his good days, he was a joy to be around. We would swap stories, we would sing, we would laugh. Lee had an encyclopedic memory of songs and song lyrics. If you were in the car with Lee, you sung with Lee. We would drive around Binghamton with music playing, singing all the words to Big Bad John, Sink the Bismarck, Roll on 18-Wheeler, and Amazing Grace. On more than one occasion, God taught me generosity through Lee. We all knew that Lee rarely had 2 quarters to rub together. That's one of the reasons we'd go to breakfast on Saturday mornings. I wanted to be sure he started off the weekend with a good meal. I usually let him keep the change for our meal and would occasionally slide him a little extra too. On more than one occasion, I saw him give some or all of the money I just gave him to a homeless person in the parking lot as we walked back to the car. He knew that what they were going through was much worse than where he was. Sometimes it was a person he knew. Sometimes he only knew where they were coming from. Lee helped me pull me out of my comfort zone, choose me to be one of his people. He would always call me on Thursday or Friday to confirm that I was coming to get him and what time I was coming to get him. I won't lie to you, and I always tell you that I was always looking forward to getting him. But afterwards, I was always glad I did. Lee's been gone for 7 years, but I still have a voicemail from him on my phone. Every once in a while, I like to play it just to hear his voice again. I do miss my friend, but I know he's where he's not held back by a body that suffers from years of abuse, seeing through eyes that could see perfectly and singing with a heavenly voice that he had when he was here alive. We were Lee's family and he was ours. Here at Sycamore View, we get to be part of a story that God is still writing, and I'm glad Lee Brown was part of it.